So what you'll find around here is that you can kind of skip, and it's very basic to say you just do 2 thin coats of yellow and you get yellow. But what's even better is if you go in with a thick coat of brown first, then you don't have to worry about the consistency of your paint. Like I haven't really thinned this much, just enough to get some wetness on the brush so that the paint flows, right? But I'm just going to paint this. This is our dark umber, right? So I say dark brown. You probably don't want it to be like black brown. We have a much darker brown, but I'm just going to go with dark umber, right? Boy, my palette needs to be cleaned. I can't even see where I put my paint. I've got like this menagerie, this crazy menagerie of stuff going on here. Right. Let's just do this top area here. We'll section it off where it's got this. I can't tell what that is. Oh, that's part of the in-between thing, right? So we'll just do this top part of the cloak, right? So dark brown, boom. Got dark brown on there. So you can do that and you're not worried about, because the 2 thin coat thing is generally used when you're like, I have yellow and I want to paint this yellow. So I'm going to start with 1 thin coat of yellow and then I'm going to go over it with another thin coat of yellow to really make the yellow opaque. And instead of doing that, you can do things like taking a dark brown, which you can just put on there, bam, and cover in 1 coat, or it doesn't even have to cover because it's not the real color you want to see. Okay. Now let's just take yellow over the top of this, for an example, right? So I'm just going to grab golden yellow, brightest yellow we got. Well, it's not the brightest, we have pale yellow, but take golden yellow. Dang it, it's probably a brand new bottle and I just shook it up and I didn't remove the seal. Pop. Keep forgetting all my paints are brand new. Now we can go in and put some yellow on here. And again, I don't have to go very thin. I just want a little bit of dampness on my brush, right? But I'm going pretty thick with the yellow, right? And now I can just start painting over my brown. And by having that brown base on there, my yellow immediately starts working a lot better than it would over just the black primer, right? Or over the white primer even, right? Like yellow works really well over white primer as well, but it still has the same problem. It still shows the base layer through it because yellow pigment, the problem with yellow is not the manufacturer's paint. All of us have problems with yellow because they stopped allowing us as manufacturers to use heavy metal pigments. That was a guitar solo. Heavy metal pigments, so we can't use like cadmium and stuff in our paints anymore because of health issues. So those were the best things for yellow, right? So we can't do that anymore. But notice how now I'm just taking this yellow, not thinning it much, and just paint it right over the brown. And I'm just, here what I'm doing is I'm just trying to stay on top of the folds. So, you know, you don't have to be this complicated. You can literally just stay away from the deep recesses where the shadows would be and just paint the tops of everything is all I'm doing here. So just real quick, come through here and paint the tops of each of these folds on this garment. But hopefully you can see immediately what's happening is that the yellow underpinned with the brown has already given me a really good kind of dirty yellow just with a very quick application of paint, right? So I can do that. And then once that's on there, come back with the yellow again. And now your second quote unquote thin coat is really just going to be coming in and grabbing like a couple of highlight areas. Right. And you can continue to, now I'm using very fast strokes. As you go slower, you can get a little bit better blending. Then you can just come in and keep doing whatever you want, right? And here, what I could do is take a, right, just bring my strokes in a little bit higher on the tops of these. Leaving that brown shadow there gives me a lot more depth than just painting yellow on there, right? And you get yellow very fast. Then I can take, I'm just going to take our pale yellow real quick. But you could mix white with your yellow to get a brighter yellow. Even your brightest yellow can go brighter for a highlight color. And so now with 3 colors, basically brown, yellow, and white, let's say, right? I'm going to go with pale yellow just because I have it here, right? But it's kind of like that. It's like adding white to yellow will give you this color. And then you can come in with that, and you can basically just real quick kind of hit it on the very tops of some of these folds, right? Towards the top of the model. Notice I'm not doing it towards the bottom of the folds, just up here towards the, as the folds go towards the shoulders, right? And very quickly you can get like a yellow cloth, right? And we've done this super quick. So I've got some brush strokes in there and things like that, but you can see if you took just a hair more time, you could get a really spectacular looking deal. And I haven't really tried, right? We haven't, the point of this is to show how easy it is and to go through and show that really by basing with brown is the secret to yellows and oranges and those colors that are really tough that you fight with, light blues, whites, right? White, I would use brown as a base and do white exactly the same way I just did, except I would go brown, bright gray, white, right? And my white would only be where I put this pale yellow on there, right? Just a very quick last coat. And most of it would be the like the dark gray. I'm sorry, did I say brown? You could use brown, but you go brown, bright gray, and most of it's going to be bright gray. And then the white is just the highlight, right? So you find that you don't have to spend as much time worried about the consistency of your paint. You're really just thinking about underpinning your paint with the right color to get more out of it, because the brown gives a shadow to the yellow and forces the yellow to not have to do so much hard work to become all 100% yellow, because you're really, I don't think in most cases you're looking for the model to be 100% yellow no matter what you're painting. It always has shadows, it always has highlights. So it's probably 50% yellow, 25% shadow, 25% highlight. That's what we get here, right? So if you paint it with the shadow color first, then your yellow doesn't have to work so hard. You really only need it to cover the 50% that you're looking for. And then you saw how if I had it thin a little bit where it was needing to cover the most, I just covered those areas up with a highlight, done, boom, right? Did you not simply begin by the shading and using the yellow as a layer instead? Exactly, exactly. But one of the big problems that most people have when they're trying to go for that too thin coats is that you're trying to add your shade on after the fact, and you can still do that, right? So let's take, let's start right now, let's take a Agrax Earth shade, right? Let's take a Agrax, right? A GW shade. And let's show you how much more work gets done if this is your base coat, but you based yellow with brown, and then you highlighted it with a mix of yellow and white real quick, right? So instead of 2 layers of yellow and then Agrax Earth shade to find your shade, what if you do brown, yellow, and then a highlight real quick? It doesn't take any extra time to do what I just did, and now put a shade over it, right? And this is where it really starts coming alive. I don't want to use my good brush for that. Don't use a good brush when using this. Now here, I'll take a brush loaded with water, right? So it's got as much water as it'll hold, and I'll go into the Agrax Earth shade. You can use shades at full volume. I typically don't, especially when you've already done your shading on them, right? But now when I go over it and do it exactly the way I normally would, right? Just slop it on there. No reason you can't. Right? But what you'll notice is now it does even extra super heavy duty work. So it's not just base coat shade. You did your base coat a little more complicated, then you put the shade over it, and now the shade really does a good job because it darkens the shadows you already have up and makes them look more natural, as opposed to just some weird gloppy stuff over a base coat, right? And your highlights still poke through and give you that highlight, right? So stuff like this is the way that we teach painting here. Not that you have to do it exactly this way, but the idea to take away is start with a darker color than you want the model to actually be, right? We're doing it with all these skin tones, right? So as I do this skin tone, I started with burnt orange. This color was the base coat, right? And so you see when I hold the paint here, you start seeing that color in the shadows, right? But when I take the paint away, what you really see is the skin tone highlight, which is the skin color. And the shadows still show out and give you a really good coloring, right? But I started with the dark color and worked up to the light color. And it takes away the need for me, because I don't use a lot of washes, so it takes away the need for me to use washes and such. But it also makes putting your light colors on a lot more simple, because like I said, the bright colors like yellow, bright blue, white, bright gray, they're very hard to use as base coats because they don't cover very well. So start with a darker version of it and then use that bright color as the least amount of paint almost. Like when you're painting white, you don't use much white. We have a Stormtrooper as an example, right? This model reads as white armor, right? Like the helmet reads as white. There's no white on the helmet except for the edge highlight right there. This is all bright gray. But it looks like white because it's so much brighter than everything else. But the only white on this model is like this little line right here, this little line right here, that line right there, right? We put that on there to show you how much brighter white can be even than what the rest of the armor looks like, right? But we haven't used much white here. It's because we started with dark gray, went to bright gray, or went to mid gray on this because it's a bigger model. So you go dark gray, middle gray, bright gray, and you've already got white, but you never had to paint white, which is a real burden color to work. Our white works wonders, but you still don't want to paint the whole model white first. It's a pain in the ass, right? So you can beat that and trick it by doing this. And then you still have white to paint as a highlight, which is what I've shown here, right? I can still go back and put a little streak of white to get a little extra punch and brightness. Because if I were to have used white and sprayed white on the armor, I can't go brighter than white, so I've lost the ability to highlight it. Same with the yellow, right? By using this yellow, by basing it with brown, then putting the yellow, then a little bit of bright yellow, then washing it, now I can go back with just the bright yellow again and pick out a little bit of highlight, and this is a great looking cloak because all my shadows are much better than if I just waited for like the Agrax Earthshade to put shadows where I need it. My brown put shadows where I wanted it, and now the Agrax Earthshade just makes that better, right? So this is the way to get the most out of washes, is to put your shadow color down first so that you get to pick where your shadows go, right? And then the wash just amplifies that and makes it look even better. Hope that makes sense.